Alright, I'm just going to talk about some of the cards that are in the battle pack right now. Talk about, what my philosophy is for cube drafting and kind of like why I designed the cards that I did and why they're in here. So I'm just going to kind of cycle through it. So those are all the level 1 monsters. Scientists and Glow Up Bulb are probably like two of the most broken cards in the whole set. The ability for this to just sit in the grave, and then if your opponent ever like makes something that can threaten your monster, the fact that you can stall out and then bring this out and just make a bigger answer is like amazing. Same thing with Scientists, just the ability to put monsters on the board and then make bigger monsters with them is absolutely absurd. I mean, if you could get this card to live for like 2-3 turns, you're going to be able to completely set the board into a position where you're winning. So, out of the level 1s, those are probably the only two that I kind of don't like. The others are all fine. Moving on to the level 2s. Level 2s, they just have kind of better effects. I wanted all the low-level monsters to have effects that kind of floated or that slowed the game down, kind of like a Penguin Soldier that adds cards back to the hand, Fortress Warrior that, prevents battle damage, Lynx lets you draw, that kind of stuff. Pretty much they're just kind of like the utility cards of the set. I would say the only cards in here that are really like... Okay, so one thing where our battle pack is right now is that there are times where there's tons of monsters on the field. I mean, there's tons of spells and traps and just not enough monsters to really fight through it. And a lot of these level 2s kind of contribute to that, where it's like, okay, there's like 5 back row, my opponent has like a level 3 monster on the field. I might have good back row, but then if I just draw into like, one of these weaker monsters, I'm not going to want to summon them and sit on them because, they have effects that are mainly like flip effects or stuff like that. So that's kind of one downside of the pack right now. Plague Spreader is a lot like Glow Up Bulb, but it's just a lot more balanced because you have to send a card from your hand back to the deck. I kind of like it, but it's the same thing where it just sits there and it's basically an extra card in your hand. What? It's like, yeah, it's just in your hand and your opponent just knows about it, so it's really interesting. Moving on to the level 3s. We have more level 3s than any other level monster in the pack, and they're kind of divided into 2 categories. They're either like beat sticks or they're also like effect cards. There really are very few beat sticks that are level 3, but they're kind of like monsters that can be used on their own to attack but also have really good effects. But you'll kind of see as you go through what kind of cards I'm talking about. I mean, something like Death Mosquito is a really good card just because it lets you basically make free attacks. Especially when there's so much like spell and trap, like battle phase trick kind of stuff. Having a monster that just floats is really, really awesome on one hand, but then on the other hand you kind of have to look at it and think something like, is this floating really worth it? Like, a tiny little monster like Card Trooper, like it has 400 attack. It could go up to 19 and then you're milling cards, but then like it'll just die on the next turn, and it's like, well, how effectively is that really going to be at eating up your opponent's back row? Like, who in their right mind, like, when I mill 3 for Card Trooper and I attack, why would anybody ever, like, play Mirror Force on it? Because I'll just get to draw a card, So, yeah, that's the one thing where I'm looking at a lot of these cards, is they're not, like, standalone beat sticks. I mean, they're all still really awesome cards, and the only card that I'm kind of unhappy with out of all of them is Summoner of Illusions, just because it requires so much setup. Like, you need to set it, you need to make sure your opponent doesn't attack it on your next turn, you need to then normal summon another monster, you need to flip it up, tribute the monster off to get out, whatever fusion monster you wanted, and then the fusion monster could just die, and like, even if it doesn't die and you get in the best case scenario 5,000 damage off of this attack, then it just disappears. It's just not really like, it requires so much to play around it to resolve the effect that I kind of don't like it. Moving on to level 4s. So this is where you kind of get monsters that just have good, like, they're standalone monsters. You could just summon them, you could kind of just destroy stuff with it, gain advantage through the battle phase, very healthy cards. I kind of want to include more cards that are like this. Some of them aren't as good, I would say, like, same kind of thing with this. It requires a little bit of setup, you have to protect it for a turn, but then after that it becomes a really strong threat on the board. So I'm thinking about adding in maybe a couple more cards that are kind of like this in this range, like Absorbing Kid from the Sky, or Boganian, or something like that just can exert pressure for having high attacks. And then rounding it up for the level 4s, we have these monsters. Yeah. So I'll move up to the high level tribute monsters. I've also pulled down considerably on these. Drawing multiples and not being able to summon them is not very good, especially when in this type of pack where monsters are constantly cycling in and out of the board. So we have 5 single tribute monsters. These 5. We used to have... Honestly, I don't even remember what else we had in here. These are pretty much the best ones. You have like the 3 horsemen, the guy that revives himself, and the guy that can't be attacked. Pretty cool. As for the multiple tribute monsters, we're down to 4. White Knight looks really cool. Yeah, that's it. The creator could go in here, but again, the creator requires so much setup just to play it right. That you need to basically tribute, 2 monsters for it. Then you have to discard a card to get a monster back. And if that monster isn't worth it, it's like a very high risk, high reward kind of card. And over multiple games, something like that just isn't consistent, That's why it's a high risk, high reward card. That's all the monsters. Moving on to spell cards, I have this divided up by like type. So these are basically spell cards that let you draw. Just the 4. They're all very healthy, very fine cards. This is a +1. But whatever, there's a little bit of just like accelerated, unfair cards to kind of keep the game even. Pretty random. Next we just have like regular, like versatile standalone spell cards. Cards that just kind of have a bunch of different manipulation effects. So let's get these out here. I like all these cards. I'm not crazy about the field spells, but I'll get into that in a minute. Ribbon of Rebirth. Love that card. Swords Revealing Light. Nightmare Steel Cage. Book. Messenger of Peace. I guess I'll just talk really quickly about these cards. Messenger is really interesting because you just pay 100 every turn and basically stall the game out for as long as you want. It's kind of like, basically the effect reads like, if you're losing, pay 500 life points and now you're back in the game, It's a pretty remarkable card. And what's been happening in a lot of duels lately is we'll get to a point where both spell and trap card zones get completely filled and we only have 2 or 3 monsters and they won't be able to fight through all the back row. And it just kind of comes to this weird stalemate situation. And so I'm trying to figure out if maybe Messenger of Peace and those kind of cards is a problem or not. Now we're just moving on to cards that alter attack and defense. This is really the heart of why I built this cube. To be able to use these kind of weaker cards, extend to kill bigger threats, that kind of stuff. I think it's a really cool concept in theory and kind of closer to how Yu-Gi-Oh! Is supposed to be. So here I'll let you take a look at these. You have a combination of quick plays and equips, and just cards that have different effects. The final part of the spells are spells that somehow get monsters off the field, or basically any type of removal card. A card that can remove a monster from the field in a way that isn't battle. So I'm just going to grab a couple cards out of here that I think are worth talking about. I think when it comes to these type of removal cards, they should definitely be hindered or at least costed in some way. A lot of these don't really have any sort of cost, but more like just a requirement to use the effect. So I'm just going to break it down really quickly into cards that can just destroy, and then cards that have a cost in order to remove things from the field. So the ones that have like a requirement to remove are these ones. They're, you know, obviously a little bit less powerful. This can only destroy face down. This can only destroy defense position monsters. This skip your draw phase. You need to destroy your own card. You need to send your own monster to the graveyard. And then you look at these ones, and they're just on like a completely different power level. I'm not sure if that's exactly a bad thing. Well, I guess this is costed too, technically. This is actually a very balanced card. Yeah, I mean, having a little bit of this is okay. The fact that Change of Heart can take anything is absolutely absurd, like, but I also feel like it's not completely overpowered in this format. Maybe it is. I don't know. So that's pretty much all of the spells. Moving on to the traps. These are the only two traps that don't fit into any category. The rest of them are either like stall-related cards, attacking, defense, altering cards, or cards that remove cards from the field. These two are just different. These are like stall-out cards. These cards will basically slow the opponent down without really giving you much of an advantage unless you combo it with another card. You know, something like Impenetrable Attack is really bad on its own, but if you have a monster that you can then Exceed Summon with or something the next turn, it's good. You know, these are very healthy because they force you to extend to play them and then extend to make the most of them. So really good to let you just like constantly keep cards on and then off the field. You know, a very healthy like churn of extension. Trap cards that can alter attacks and defenses. They're pretty cool. They're very powerful. What'll usually happen is like you're always gonna have like one card set pretty much. Like you're never gonna have just like a clear back row. And what's tricky is like if you have, you know, back row set that's like a monster removal card as well as like an attack and defense altering card, it makes it very difficult to navigate through. So I'll give an example once I go through these. I was reading over kind of like how Konami designed Battle Pack 2 and what kind of theory basically they were using to make it more focused on the battle phase. And one thing they were saying is that like there's hardly any monster removal and hardly any spell and trap removal, and because of that it forces the players to both you know, use the battle phase in order to gain advantage. So I was thinking about that, but then I realized that like there still are tons of spells and traps in there that alter things, and so the problem isn't having monster removal in our thing, because I think if we just had like, if all of these removal cards instead were attack and defense altering cards like this stuff, we would still be in the same exact situation where each player has a bunch of spell and trap set and not enough monsters to get all the way through it, you know, because we're all just going to wind up flipping, and it'll just be kind of like random and who has the stronger quick plays and attack altering trap cards, you know. So this is a situation that comes up kind of frequently, at least it did when I was dueling my friend with it, is like one player would have like Donzalug in attack mode, the other player would have like Victory Viper, so then, you know, I would have Donzalug, I would have a Mirror Force face down on my side, and my opponent might have like a Blast with Chain and a Michizuri or something, okay? So this is my field, that's their field. It's like, okay, let's say I summon Donzalug and there's my set Mirror Force, right? Then my opponent summons Victory Viper and sets 2. Now both of us want to get the battle, want to win this battle, because if Donzalug wins, then I get to discard a card. But if Victory Viper wins, then he gets to special summon a token. So Victory Viper is just going to set the Blast with Chain, obviously, and be like, okay, that's how I'm going to win. But now the Donzalug is just going to be like, well, I don't need to attack because he clearly has a card, and so when he attacks, I'll Mirror Force. And so it's just kind of like this really convoluted situation where it's like, okay, well, now who's actually going to get the effect? Because if this player doesn't need to actually be aggressive either. You know, he's just like, okay, well, I'm sitting on this. If he tries to attack, I can just flip this up and then, you know, win the game by getting out another token that has 1700, and then, you know, so both of them are just going to wind up sitting in this situation, just drawing, setting more back rows without summoning more monsters because they don't need to, and then you're just in this really convoluted, you know, messy situation. And so let's say, like, one player is just waiting until they draw, you know, they draw Offerings to the Doom. So he goes, okay, well, I play Offerings on your guy. And it dies, and they just go, oh, I flip Mijizuri, and then kill your thing. Now there's absolutely no player interaction in terms of the battle phase, and both players are just left with, you know, a card left. This player would probably be in the advantage just because they had Mirror Force as opposed to Blast with Chain. But still, what I'm saying is, like, not having enough monsters to fight through the back row makes players not want to battle. And that's a big problem. So yeah, that's the next thing I'm going to fix. If you have any suggestions, let me know. But I think it's just adding a couple more beat sticks. I guess really quickly I'll go through the extra deck. It's not complete, but I guess I'll kind of show it to you guys. Let me just gather it together. It's kind of all over the place right now. Cool. So fusions, I guess. Fusions are another part of this that I'm not crazy about, just because they need so much setup. I took Metamorphosis out for right now, just because it's another one of those cards that doesn't really, like, you're never gonna Metamorphosis into anything worthwhile without, you know, negging yourself. At least those are my thoughts. So now, Slacker Magician is our rank 1. We also have that Lionheart thing, but I don't have it. Here, I'll just kind of go through, like, haphazardly. One thing I did want to show you guys is all of the monsters that also have, you know, removal effects, because I think they're important to take a look at and figure out if they actually have anything, like, broken about them, and kind of what the most powerful extra deck monsters are. Those are all really cool cards. Like, these are, like, it's awesome. I love the idea of just extending into making a larger monster than having to, you know, extend further to beat it and that kind of thing. I think that's really fun, just making bigger and bigger monsters and knocking each other out. So those are all very fairly balanced extra deck monsters. The ones that are not so, well, the ones that remove cards from the field or are just somehow unfair are these ones. So this one, I mean, this one just removes from the field. This one's totally balanced, so obviously we're keeping that. This one, 2 level 8 monsters to be able to, you know, 1-for-1. Like, these are both fine. Diamond Direwolf has to kill himself to kill another card. Requires 2 level 4s, you know, super fine. This guy prevents battle phase interaction. So when there's so much, you know, focus on activating spells and traps and, like, flip effects in the battle phase, this guy basically says, hey, I'm not going to let you do any of that. So he's kind of unfair. He's probably these are probably the 2 most unfair cards in the extra deck. There's also this guy, which basically says, hey, I can summon for free, and if you torrential me, you'll get another monster out. But the fact that he can only special summon a monster when he's destroyed by a card effect makes him pretty fine. Brionic, I feel like, for being level 6, he's really good, just because you can discard and then remove threats, and then just attack for a game, you know? Just he could swing in. Like, anytime you summon him, if your opponent, they're probably only going to have 1, maybe 2 monsters. So the fact that you can just get in a 2,000 hit, you know, late game is pretty ridiculous. and then early game he's really not that good. And then even something like Sahemeth, I'm realizing how good of a card this is. He's pretty much like my favorite one to go to because he's 24, and then if he battles with something, he gets to get rid of it. So basically, you know, when you summon him and your opponent just has like, you know, something weaker, you just get to kill it, and then they're gonna have to, you know, try really hard to get over it. But then if they actually do go ahead and, you know, summon something that's even larger than him, then they're, you know, then it's like, okay, cool, I attack it, and then I can just get rid of it. So you know, it's like a pretty awesome card in that way. So I just wanted to show you the couple cards that I decided I wanted to remove from here. And basically, I wanted to remove these because either too situational or they just wouldn't really, like, they weren't in the spirit of the like top decking kind of game that I wanted to create. So Metamorphosis, Trap Dust Shoot, Vylon Tetra, Witch of the Black Forest, Tyrant Dragon, Different Dimension Gate, Creature Swap, Soul Exchange, and Painful Choice. Pulling all these out. So Painful Choice, basically, since there's no graveyard setup at all, and we don't really pick what decks we use, you're pretty much just going to be putting yourself really far behind, and then your opponent gives you like the worst card. It's only good like if you have like a really good deck, in which case it's probably unnecessary. Soul Exchange, as I took out a lot of the tribute monsters, this becomes a lot worse. Creature Swap. I mean, it's cool when you pull it off, but like, I also wanted to cut down on some of the monster removal, so that's why I decided to pull these out, because they're super situational and they're just not as like nice standalone cards. Tyrant Dragon, just to cut down on the level 2 tribute monsters. Witch and Vylon Tetra, because they basically make your extensions free. You know, like, okay, let's just take these two cards, for example. Right? So you go, you know, you have Witch, you summon Vylon Tetra, you synchro the two of them for Braionic. Witch lets you search a card from the deck, so let's say you grab, like, Fabled Cerebral or Fabled Catsith, you know, discard it for Brionic's effect, get it out, pop another card. Like, you basically just took these two cards, created a Braionic that can't be destroyed, and then you have another card on the field, you know? So it's like, you took two, and then you wound up getting 3 on the field and also having a huge amount of attack. Like, it's free extensions, so that's not really what this is about. Yeah, and I just didn't like these. So yeah, that's pretty much everything. It's still really fun to do. I just think that there are points where it just gets really convoluted and the fields get kind of clogged up, and so if you have any recommendations on what kind of spells and traps to take out, really appreciate it. I mean, just right here with these cards that I just removed, like, you know, we could put in 10 more monsters right there, and then that'll probably help fix it at least a little bit. Like, yeah, so if you can come up with any monsters that you'd want to see in here, let me know. Alright, thanks, bye.